Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Meenal's World. I did promise part 2 just after I released part 1, as soon as I could. I've had a lot on my plate, as you may understand, after giving birth, and the whole experience has been very emotional, very unique, and very special. It's not something I can really talk about right now because I'm still processing everything. I'm still trying to understand what all of this means to me, because so much has changed even in the last 10 days. And when I first held my baby, when she was born on the 14th of July, she just felt like a toy. I wasn't really sure what to do with her. And then now I see her in such a different way because she's growing every day. She's becoming more cuddly and she's becoming a bit chubbier as well. But at the beginning, she was so tiny. I just didn't really understand what was going on, and I didn't really understand what the next few weeks would entail, because I guess it's just one of those things that you just learn on the job. And it always reminds me of my first job as a doctor, where I couldn't take bloods from anybody because I didn't know how to. I wasn't sure where equipment was. I didn't have the confidence to ask questions or do the research to find solutions to my patients' problems. But now with the baby, it's been pretty much the same thing, except for the fact that I've had to make the decision not to look into the internet too much, because I think raising a child is very unique to every individual and to every couple. So I'm just trying to go based on my experiences, my mother's experiences, and just a few people I trust, really. I think the internet is a bit of a dangerous place to go into. But I'm updating a lot on Instagram. I'm updating a lot of my thoughts, my feelings, my journey as a new mother, as a young mother, with my husband as well. And I hope you're all enjoying these updates, because I think just watching other people grow in their own journeys and experience new things is really important to sort of share that, because we're living in such a different generation where we're trying to do things in our own way. And it's quite funny because when I spoke to Kreena before giving birth, I remember telling Kreena how I was afraid to even breastfeed in front of my mom because I was so shy. We didn't have that sort of relationship. And now, I mean, my mom and I are just connected on such a different level, and we're so close. I'm so much more grateful for everything she does for me. So, when you're younger and your parents say you just wait till you have kids, I think I understand what that means now. I hate to admit that, but this episode with Kreena was very special because I did part 2 after giving birth, and part 1 was before I gave birth. So I had a different sort of perspective now, because now I have my own child, and Kreena talks about her journey, about trying to grow her own family. We talk about motherhood. We talk about how motherhood can be achieved in many different ways. You don't have to genetically be connected to your children to be a good mother. Motherhood can take different forms, and that was a very eye-opening conversation for me. A very important conversation for many women who listen to this podcast as well. Many women who may be single, many women who can't conceive for whatever reason. And this episode is really, really important because Kreena talks about her own difficulties and how she overcame them. And I tell you, I kept holding my breath every time Kreena was talking about her journey, because I just wasn't sure if she'd reached the end of the tunnel, because she was always facing so many difficulties and so many obstacles. But she's a warrior and she's a fighter. And this episode will really bring you a new perspective on resilience. And we talk about how every obstacle she's faced has made her a stronger person. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will continue to update all of you on my journey with motherhood, mainly on Instagram, and I might do an episode in the near future, maybe with my husband as well. So stay tuned and enjoy this episode. So welcome back, Kreena, to part 2. I can't believe I'm 9 days postpartum and I'm sat here doing this with you again.
I can't believe that you're here doing this.
But I had to, Kreena. I felt like it was such a fitting time to have this conversation, especially with the
Yeah.
experiences I've had over the last week or so. Um, I think now I'm in the right emotional state to talk about it, because I think
Mm-hmm.
last few days probably was a bit too soon because I was too emotional. I think later on,
Mm.
because there's so much happening, I might just forget how I'm feeling. So
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
let's just get Kreena when I can. And I've just managed to feed the baby. So if
Brilliant.
she's crying, it's my husband's fault, not mine. So how have you been, Kreena, over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, look, I've been fine. I definitely haven't just had a baby, so I have no complaints here. But yeah, no, well, we're good. It's actually, to be fair, it's been a bit of a roller coaster week though since we've spoken. We had last week we had a scan of the babies, so that was really
But
lovely
before
to
we
get
get
up
to that,
to get.
Karina, I don't think we mentioned
Mm.
this in part one. We said that you were expecting twins.
Oh
We
yes,
got to that.
yeah,
So now you're mentioning
we
the
got
scan. So let's
yeah.
just take a few steps back, just to
Okay,
get
before yeah,
everybody.
let's not even worry about how my week was, and let's actually just record the podcast.
No, we can't talk about your week. I mean, I like it when my
Well, yeah.
podcasts become therapy sessions as well. I mean, it will
Well, yeah,
benefit both of us.
I needed it this week. I needed it. My point was that we had a really good beginning to the week, and then I had a bit of a rough middle of the week because I had to go back into my oncologist because I found a bit of a lump in my boob and ended up having to have it scanned and stuff. So that was a bit nervous. It's always, a really nerve-wracking time when there's something not quite right
Yeah.
after you've had, a cancer diagnosis. So I had a bit of a freak out, but we did an ultrasound and everything's fine. So
Oh,
I'm
okay. Good.
back in the land of normality.
Good.
So
Good. So
yeah,
what was that
yeah.
lump then? Was it just like a benign adipose tissue
It's
or?
not. It was actually just probably just a bit of scar from my
Oh,
reconstruction.
okay.
And just a bit of where the tissue itself is totally clean. Like they showed me the pictures of it, and there's nothing funny there. It was just a natural sort of fold in the healing of
Okay.
the
Fine.
internal tissue or whatever it is that like
Oh, I'm really, really
that's
glad that
just what it was. So
that's all
yeah.
sorted. But Karina, just out of
Mhm.
curiosity, so when you found the lump to when you had the scan, what
Mm.
was the time difference?
Oh, like days, like
Really?
like
All through the
3 days.
NHS?
No, I have
Ah,
private healthcare.
I was
Yeah, I have
thinking, I
private
was like,
healthcare.
that sounds too quick. Like,
Yeah,
usually people in the
yeah.
NHS wait a much longer time to.
No, I'm really lucky. I was treated privately through my employer because I company benefit
Yeah,
was private healthcare. So I
yeah.
had actually my chemo was privately, and it means
Oh,
that if there's
right.
something, I mean, I have to say though, I mean, when I called my GP and she saw me immediately
Mm,
because she was like, I know your history. She saw me immediately, and then she was like, well, yeah, go back to your consultant, and if you can't get back there, then I'll make sure we get you referred. So I think equally she would have been really good.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
She was all for turning it around really quickly as well. So
Yeah. No, but Karina, I think I've
anyway.
spoken a lot about the NHS on the podcast over the last few months. And I remember my first guest, Ravine, who
Mm,
is also a cancer patient, and she went down the private route because she said the NHS was taking too long for her.
mm,
And I remember speaking to her and saying that, oh, as much as I love the NHS, as a doctor, I feel stuck in this big system that I can't go the
mm,
extra mile if I want to, because ultimately it's down to how the system works. If there's a long waiting list,
mm,
I can't do anything about that. Um, but then I remember that episode, and now I look at my own personal experience with the NHS
mm.
as a pregnant woman and my delivery, and it was almost perfect, I would say,
Yeah,
in terms of the information I was given
yeah.
and the care I had. But not everybody has that experience. And I think,
I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? Like it's very easy just to say the NHS is really slow or whatever, but I think it's the people probably have issues privately as well. You just don't
mm,
hear about it as much, and it's
probably,
just, I always think when I look at myself and like the treatment I had before I switched to my private healthcare or the ongoing treatment, I see my GP really frequently, so I'm still getting that on the NHS. My mum is acutely unwell, like she's
mm,
had heart failure herself, she's got lung disease, and I look at how she is treated through the NHS, and actually I couldn't fault it because
mm.
she's seen when she needs to be seen, and the consultants are incredible. Um, and in fact, we share a consultant. My cardiologist is the same.
Oh,
She sees
right.
him on the NHS, and I see him privately.
Okay.
Um, and the care is no different for the two of us, really.
Yeah.
It's the same doctor and he's delivering the same advice and stuff. So
Mm.
I'm really loyal to the NHS. I think it's incredible, and I think it's just like any other system that gets really big, it's going to get a bit slow and cumbersome. But
Yeah.
I kind of feel like when it needs to see you urgently, it does see you
Mm.
urgently, and it, maybe like there are the odd circumstances where it's really slow, but
Yeah,
I
so
don't know.
we
It's
when I had
difficult.
my so I delivered my baby via C-section Tuesday morning,
Mm,
14th July, Tuesday morning. And it was just that night for me that I had to stay in hospital that one night. And I was in a lot of pain. I mean, I've just had major abdominal surgery, so it's
yeah.
understandable. But there weren't enough midwives for all the patients that were in that ward. So when you ask for pain
Oh,
relief,
okay.
I I mean, it took a long time for me to get there, but I don't blame them. It's just, again, the system
Mm,
is such that they can only employ a certain number of midwives, and because they only have a certain
yeah.
budget. And it just made me realize that it's very difficult to sort of point a finger and say you're at fault or you're at fault. Actually, it's
Mm,
not like that. It's such a big organization. But then again,
yeah.
I came out the next day afternoon immediately, and since then I've had
Mm,
very good care. So I think my perception of the NHS has changed as a patient, because I've always seen it through the eyes of a doctor. So
yeah.
now it's changed. But anyway, going back to what you were saying about uh, um, your week. So you mentioned that you had the scan and
Mm,
of the the new members of your family, we can say.
yeah.
So the last time we spoke, Kreena, you mentioned that we spoke about surrogacy, and we spoke about how, having a child in your life meant so much to you, and how you went down the route of planning for growing your family. So
Mm.
at what stage did you decide to go through surrogacy again?
So the second time round, it was not long after we'd actually become parents to Amala, my
Hmm.
firstborn. We obviously had the initial period where we really settled in to parenthood and stuff, and we were in touch with Ina, my surrogate, throughout. So always just checking in. I was conscious that she's given birth to this baby, but she doesn't have the baby with her, so I wanted her to make sure that she had visibility of the child, that it wasn't just like, oh, thanks for the baby, and we then
Hmm.
decided to set off on our lives. It wasn't like that at all. She was, we would send her pictures and we would stay in touch. And we actually, um when Amala was 6 weeks old, we went to register her birth, and we have to do that in the town that the baby's born in. So we were
Hmm.
back up in
Hmm.
Ina's hometown. So we arranged to meet with her that day, and she came to that registering of the baby and stuff. It was really lovely. So we'd kept in touch, and we just sort of said in jest, like, I think it was over a message of some sort, and she just, or it was in person, I can't remember, and she was like, oh yeah, I would do it again, but only for you, in that, she would do another surrogacy journey, but only with us,
Yep.
in that she wasn't up for the whole getting to know you again and all of that time that needs investing to form a relationship with a new couple.
Hmm.
So I just, after a while said to her, like, were you serious? Because, I would love another baby. I never really planned to stop at one.
Yep.
It was always our intention to have more than one child. I think we're Indian and really used to extended family and big
Mm.
families. And I myself am, I'm one of two. My husband's one of two. Um, and we've always loved like the family gatherings and having that closeness with siblings and cousins. So I kind of, probably even before Amala was born, I always saw my future with more than one child. So um it just meant that we had to start thinking relatively early on what we were going to do in terms of bringing a sibling into our lives, and we knew it wasn't going to be straightforward. So we discussed with Ina, like, if we were to go again, like what would be a reasonable time frame, and like
Hmm.
we always knew we would wait at least 1 year for her body to recover, and
Of
for her
course.
to have enough strength, and for her family to have had some family time before we then fall pregnant again. So we knew we would wait at least a year. um and then I guess the year passed and we continued to have conversations, and we'd met up with Ina a couple of times and just said, look, are you still thinking it would work on a sibling journey? And she said, yeah. um the only thing is I would love to do it before I'm 40, so that's in 2 years time. So
Oh, right.
um let's think roughly about dates.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was always on the radar that we were gonna look for a sibling journey. And I guess then the question was how we would create that sibling, knowing that we didn't have any embryos of our own um to use to make a sibling. And I can't remember if we discussed that last time.
Mm-mm.
Did we
No,
didn't, did we? So what had happened
because
was that when
I
we
didn't remember you talking about not having embryos for this second
yeah
trial that you were planning.
okay. So what had happened was we when we transferred the embryo for Amala, when we arrived at that clinic, we had 11 day one embryos. So we'd created embryos in 2013. They were fertilized and frozen at day one, and then we went to our fertility clinic with the journey with Amala, and we were advised that we should defrost all of them, grow them to 5-day-old embryos, because that
Mm.
gives the best chance of success for pregnancy on transfer. And then at the end of once we'd got them to 5 days, look at which one is the strongest, use that for transfer, and everything else would need to be frozen, refrozen, ready for another journey. And so that was all what we had planned. And when we did the transfer to Ina that day, I'd spoken to an embryology team and they had said, yeah, your embryos are looking good. You've got 4 or 5 that are really strong. There's one particularly strong one that we've picked out for transfer today, and the rest of them need to be refrozen. We're just going to we're going to leave them a little bit longer, see what they do, and then we'll refreeze them. And that was the plan, and that's what we always thought was going to happen. And the day after transfer, I called the clinic just to see how many they refroze, and wasn't able to get through to anyone, and thought, oh, that's really weird. Normally there's always someone in embryology who
Mm.
can answer my call. That was a Friday, didn't hear back. Then I tried again on the Monday and didn't get a call back. And on the Tuesday, ended up calling the clinic manager and just saying, look, I've been trying to get in touch with you guys since Friday, and no one's told me how many embryos you've refrozen, and I just really want to know for my own peace of mind. And she put the call through to embryology, and I got a call back a little bit later, and a lady who I'd never spoken to was on the other end of the phone, and she just said, oh, Mrs. Dhiman, I think you might be a little bit confused. And I was like, confused about what? And she goes, oh, I've been told you want to know how many embryos we've refrozen, but we didn't refreeze anything. Everything was allowed to perish.
What?
And that was exactly my reaction at the time. And I couldn't believe the words that she was saying. And I was like, no, I think you're confused. There was clear guidance that our embryos had to be refrozen. I have no option to harvest eggs again. These were all that we had of mine and my partner's genetic material combined
Mm.
for now and forever, sort of thing. And she just said, well, no, we didn't keep anything. It's all gone. And I just kept thinking, I hope this is an error. I just hope she's got it wrong. I hope
Yeah.
she's reading someone else's notes. But I remember exactly where I was at that point in time, where that phone call, where I was in my house, and I just sort of fell to the ground, and I had to hang up the phone, and I cried like I've never cried before, because to me that was my chance of having a child just taken away from me. That
Hmm.
was, I'd almost been dreaming of a sibling from Amala before Amala even existed, because
Hmm.
I'd always thought, I've got 11 embryos, I will be able to have 2 children from them. That's just where my head was at. And I didn't for a second think that the thing that would stop me from having them would be a clinical error. I always thought that, well, if they don't survive, then that's fine. I've tried as hard as I can to bring them to life. But this was like someone had taken that choice away from me,
Yeah.
without our permission.
And it can't be undone
So
either. And
no, it couldn't be undone.
there's no alternative to that.
No, no, there wasn't. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. And I felt really alone at that point, because, I called my husband and I told him, and when he came back, we were talking, I couldn't stop crying, and I kept saying to him, I can't believe what they've done. And he just said, it's okay, we'll find another way, we'll find another way. And I became very angry, and I thought and I actually used to say it to him, I go, it's very easy for you to say we'll find another way, because you can genetically father another child, I can't. You will not know how I feel, because you can be the biological father of another child, I cannot be the biological mother of another child. Like, and I wasn't resentful to him, but I was very angry, because then I was angered that, my health meant I couldn't do it again. This clinical error meant that my opportunity had been lost of a biological sibling for Amala, and it really hurt. And at that point, we didn't even know that our surrogate was pregnant, because it was literally 3 days, 4 days after transfer. So as soon as I'd spoken to Sati after that call, I called Ina, and she just said, "Oh, did you hear from the clinic?" Because she'd also been calling me, just saying, Kreena, what are they? How many have they refrozen? Like, I want to know, because if we go again, it would be really nice to know how many we've got. And I rang her, and I was like, you're not actually going to believe what I'm about to say to you. They've thrown them away. They've just discarded everything that we had left. And she couldn't believe it, and she was like, how can that happen? You were in the room with the woman, like, you told her. And I was like, I know, we've had a whole conversation about it, and something's gone wrong, but we don't have any other options. And I remember her, she just like, well, this embryo better stick. Like, this has to work. There's no other option for, this cannot not work. Like, the
So
embryo
at this
inside me
point,
is the only embryo you have.
so at this point, when they had told you they had discarded what you thought they had frozen, at this point,
Yeah.
your surrogate mother was already, they already implanted one embryo into the surrogate mother.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you only had that string of hope that would work. And if that didn't work, it was game over.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we were at, and it put an immense amount of pressure on her,
Of course,
to hope that pregnancy, that transfer resulted in a pregnancy.
So how long after the transfer? So once they've implanted the embryo into the surrogate mother's womb, how long does it take to know that the pregnancy is a liable pregnancy?
You wait for 10, well, it's 10 days, 10 days, and then you'd have a blood test to measure your HCG levels,
Right.
to see if that resulted in a pregnancy. And we'd received this news 4 days, so Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 4 days after.
4 days.
So we still had 6 days to wait.
Oh, right. Those 6 days must have been the longest 6 days of your life.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was the sort of after the phone call we'd had on the Tuesday, I think the next 2 days were really difficult, and we were in a really dark place. But quite quickly, I think it's probably my nature, I realized that I had to actually pick myself up and just channel positivity to Ina and this potential baby that she was carrying, because the negative energy wasn't going to help anyone in this current situation. And we almost had to park the issue of what happened with the other embryos while we focused on bringing the one that we still had alive back to life.
So Kreena, before all of this, you've obviously been through so much with your breast cancer, your heart failure, and your hospital admissions. Now, those experiences were very difficult to go through. In any way at all, did those experiences help you deal with this one in particular?
I think what helped is probably the resilience I've built up over the years.
It's like a muscle, isn't it?
Yeah, and mine gets tested an awful lot.
Yeah.
So I think it was sort of my resilience, and I'd always, through my sort of, once I'd come to terms with cancer, I'd realized the power of positivity and the power of the mind, and I'd really got into mindful practices and meditation, and channeling my energy for good. And I think that really helped me at this point, because it stopped me from becoming, and I could have very easily spiraled into anger and real frustration, and probably even hate, if I allowed it to. But I consciously reined that back and just said, this isn't the time, and there isn't space for that, because we've got to put everything into manifesting this embryo into a baby. And that is all I did from that point on. Like, from then until Amala was born, all I focused on was making sure she was healthy and making sure that she arrived safely with us.
So how did you deal with the fact that they threw away, or they discarded your embryos? I mean, because that's something that's like not acceptable. Did you have
It's not.
any
And
time or energy to deal with that as well on the side? Because that had to
I
be
mean, I
dealt with.
raised it with the clinic managers, and I told them that I was really dissatisfied. I'd had one meeting. I went back to the clinic and had one meeting with them,
Mm.
where the head embryologist tried to explain to me what had happened, and he turned around and said to me that he had had a personal family crisis that had taken him away from the workplace, and he's left someone else in charge, and there was perhaps a communication error, but didn't ever fully hold his hands up, because he just sort of then turned around and said, but your embryos might not have made a refreeze, and they may not have ever actually taken if
So
you
they were
did
trying to
another
double
transfer
down.
anyway. Yeah, and I just said, well, it wasn't about whether the embryos were a good quality, or whether they did or didn't take, on a second transfer. It was about my choice and my rights being taken away. And actually, if even if they were poor quality embryos, it was my choice to pay for storage for them, and it would be my choice to try and transfer them, and my choice to try and bring them to life. It wasn't up to you to take
Yeah.
all of that away from me.
I think I mean, think
um
about it now, it's like you literally threw life away.
mm, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. That's like I sometimes think people must think I'm a real drama queen, but to me that was my children. Like, you
No,
you literally killed everything I had of,
yeah.
you know of being a mother to those.
Mm.
And I struggled, and so, I didn't do much after that. I purposely didn't do much, because all I wanted was the one baby that we had to be born and to be healthy, and I didn't want the negativity to overwhelm or overshadow that in any way. And then once Amala was born, I started to look into it again. And I raised it again with the clinic, and sort of have gone through now, and it's still live now, a formal complaints process. Separately, I sought legal advice on where I
Yeah.
stood with this. Um, but but the bottom line is, because we found another way of becoming parents, that we have no right to sue for embryos that were damaged, because we've still remedied our pain, which I think is really bad, and I find that really soul
It
destroying,
is. Yeah.
because it almost says that they weren't worth anything, and they
Mm.
just because we found a solution, it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be justice for those embryos that were discarded. But it's the way the judicial system works, and we've been told that there wouldn't be any point in taking this to court.
Really.
Mm.
So what was the solution then to grow your family?
So the solution, and the solution didn't come overnight.
Sorry, Kreena, just for our listeners, just for clarity, this
Yeah,
whole experience happened with Amala, your first child.
yeah.
So
So this all happened in 2018.
right, so this happened when you were trying to start your family with the first child.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
had told you they had discarded the embryos, but they had already implanted the surrogate mother with the embryo. So you were
yeah,
just lying on that
yeah,
hope. Now we're
yeah,
talking about your growing your family, but you don't have any embryos.
yeah.
So what was the solution to that, Kreena?
So the solution was a lot of it was a lot of work on myself, a lot of coming to terms with everything that happened. I spent a good amount of time almost counseling myself to let go what happened to those
Yeah.
embryos, and acknowledge and accept that, my ultimate belief that everything happens for a reason, and, whatever has happened. And again, it's probably built from my previous experiences of acceptance of these things that happen to us and not fighting them. I almost had to accept that this was always destined to actually happen. And I had to find another way. So I then started thinking about what I would do, and pretty quickly felt that if I had another child, I would want it to be my husband's genetics, even if it couldn't be mine. So rather than consider adoption or those options for parenthood, we first thought we would like to look for an egg donor, and use, my husband to fertilize that, so the two children would at least be siblings
Mm-hmm.
through his genes. Um, and, we would still have that opportunity to go through the whole pregnancy and, the birthing of new life that was as close to something I would do myself had I not had all of my issues. So that was the route we knew we would take, but we didn't take it lightheartedly. Like there was a lot of conversations between me and Sati about how we would feel with having one child that was genetically ours and a second child that we would look to conceive via egg donation. I definitely would spend a lot of time in my own head, on my own, just thinking, look, am I in a position to love a child that's not
Mm.
biologically mine the same as I love this child that is biologically mine? And I would actually then look at every relationship I had with children, not just my daughter, but like my nieces, my
Mm.
nephews, my friends' kids, and I look at the love that I have for them. And I would then just say, look, Rena, look at how much, like, if anything happened to the parents of any of these children, would you sweep them up and call them yours if you had to? And absolutely I would. And and even looking at Amala, I don't love her because she's biologically mine.
Mm.
I love her because I've nurtured her from the day
Mm.
she was born, and I've grown her, and I've been her mom. Like,
Mm.
and what I've now realized is that genetics don't make you a mom. It's everything else,
Mm.
It's that child knowing that you're their protector and you're their comfort and you're their provider. And it doesn't matter whose genes make me a mom,
Yeah.
because what I realized was that motherhood isn't what we are brought up to believe it to be. Like, and I never in my upbringing heard of anyone who became a mum through egg donation. Like, I've never heard of it. I had heard of one story of someone in our family, distant relatives, becoming parents through adoption,
Mm.
but all I had known was that they had hidden that adoption. So I had never
Oh,
really, yeah, and I had never been exposed to this. Embrace it. It doesn't matter how you become a mum. Like, you are a mum. That's all that matters.
that's really
And
interesting,
so,
Kreena, because you hit a very good point there. When I hold my baby every day, I never actually
mm,
think this is mine. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like I never think, oh, she's got my genes, or she's got. I mean, sometimes I'm like, okay, she looks a bit like me, or like those sort of
yeah,
things.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I've never
yeah,
looked to her in such a way that this is sort of my property, or my
exactly
blood. This
that.
is
Yeah,
my bloodline. This is my genes going down.
yeah.
I've never looked at it like that. When I look into her
Mm.
eyes and when I play with her and when I spend time with her, this is a
She's
baby
just,
I want to grow into something so great and so to grow into
mm,
this amazing person. Not for
yeah.
me.
And it doesn't, yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't
for her,
matter.
you want
Yeah,
her to make the best version of herself.
and I'm
Like,
saying this to you, Karina, as obviously as someone who's just given birth and she's genetically my
yeah,
child. That's something I've never even
mm,
thought of. So for you to go
yeah,
into this new path of motherhood, it would be
yeah,
it would be something that would be quite normal for me as well, actually.
yeah. And I think that's it. I think it's just that we're so conditioned to believe that motherhood is a certain thing, that it's only when you're forced to stop and step back and actually question what you yourself believe motherhood to be and what you perceive it to be
Mm.
is the only thing that actually you need to come to terms with. And I quite, once I decided, and once me and Sati had the conversation that, look, if we want to become parents again, we're going to have to look for a donor. Once we'd had that conversation, it was just about me accepting that, you know I was going to be a mum in this other way, and actually that was totally fine.
Yeah.
Like, for me and him, that was totally fine. And like just like you say, I don't love my daughter Amala. I don't love her for the DNA that runs within
Mm.
her. I love her for her as the person
Mm.
that she is. um and that's why I know it, and why I knew it would have been absolutely fine to become a parent through egg
And
donation.
did you have, because I mean, talking about your feelings and your emotions as a woman going through this must have been quite difficult to explain to your husband, right? And it's not his fault. It's a very
No,
difficult thing for anybody to understand because your husband would ultimately be the biological father of this
mm,
child or these children, but you're not in that
yeah.
position. So, what kind of support could your husband offer at that point?
He would just always tell me that it was like that I was making up problems, because I was constantly like,
Mm.
I was just scenario planning almost, but it was right too, because I was just like checking that I was comfortable with every eventuality. Like, like, what if people just keep telling me that she doesn't look like me? Would I take it personally?
Mm.
Or like, what if someone said out of ignorance that she's not yours because to them
Yeah.
genetics makes someone a mum? So I would always keep thinking about what are these things that could happen that could just throw me off, like, that could make me question my feasibility as a mum.
Mm.
And then he just kept saying, why are you so worried about that? Because it's fine. Like, so he was almost like, he was on board and he didn't see any issue with it. And I think men are very much like that, aren't they? They're not like going to go looking for 101 problems. If there's a solution, they're like, yeah, I'll take
Take
that. I
it,
don't need to
yeah,
worry about every other
yeah.
problem that could potentially come my way. Like, he was happy and he was comfortable. So it was very much like he just allowed me to go through that process of making sure that it was the right thing for me to do
And was it?
and for us to do as a couple.
I was going to ask you, Kreena, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to ask, was there
No.
any support groups available for you at this stage? Because a lot of women must have got, a lot of other women may have gone through something
Yeah.
like this.
I think maybe there was, but I wasn't drawing upon them. I
Okay.
think I said this the first time, that I'm quite a person that if I'm in a situation and I have a gut feel of what I need to do, or I have a view, I really like to make sure I cement my own feelings and make sure I'm comfortable with my choices, and then bring in other people's perceptions
Right.
afterwards, because I don't like to be influenced by other people when I'm making really important decisions about my own life. And I like to just try and like hum out all of that sound and that background noise. And I just like to focus on what I think I need to do, make sure I'm comfortable with it, and then seek external counsel once I think, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Now I'll go and get advice on whether anyone else thinks there's other things I should look at, or I don't know. I'm very much just sort myself
Sorry,
out and
Kreena, my phone.
get to where I need to. That's right.
Sorry, carry on. I'm not going to cut that out because that's just life, and people need
Okay.
to know that
Yeah.
my life
No,
isn't
that's
perfectly
fine.
running. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Kreena.
Yeah, that's fine. So I didn't draw on support group as such, but what I had looked at is when I was in the surrogacy world, when we conceived with Amala, that and we used our own embryo, that's called gestational surrogacy.
Yeah.
So it's the couple's DNA implanted into someone else. Now, in surrogacy, there is another form of surrogacy that's called traditional surrogacy. And traditional surrogacy is where a surrogate uses her egg and the sperm of the intended father.
Oh.
So in that circumstance, the mother is not genetically mother to a child. So I had been sort of surrounded by all of these amazing intended mothers who have become mums through traditional surrogacy, and knew that they all had really powerful connections to their children, that there was no, and in these situations, like the surrogate is almost using her egg, or she's using her egg, growing it into a baby, but that baby becomes the child of the intended parents. So there's a real link between the surrogate and the child, but there's the intended mother is still always the mum. Like, there's no questioning that. So because I'd seen that's egg donation in a different form, and so I'd been comfortable with that sort of.
And you seem to have a very good relationship with the surrogate mother of Amala. So did that help in bringing your confidence and?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Ina and I had a conversation about whether we would look to do traditional surrogacy for our second, knowing that we needed a donor. But it wasn't something that she was comfortable with, because she had never really gone into surrogacy thinking she would give her eggs as well. She would always just seen it as using using the couple's genetics. And in the end, when I had conversations with Sati, we really thought that we would have actually liked to have a donor who looked a little bit like me. We didn't want our first choice would not have been a white egg donor, and there were reasons for that. Not really reasons that are I want my kid to look like me, because face it, Amala doesn't actually look like me, and she is my genetics. Like, it was more because I think I was really mindful that if we brought a child in through egg donation, that one child would have a different biology to the other three members of its family. And I wanted to do what I could to make sure that that child was comfortable with its own identity as it went forth in life. And I kind of know the community I'm from, and I know that we look at families and we sort of, you'll see a family across the road, and if they look a bit different, you'll be like, oh, I wonder if that's their kid, or I wonder if that's, it is just what people do. So I wanted a donor that looked like me, just because it would save the child a lot of questions as it grew up into an adult. Because if it was half white and half brown, it would look significantly
Yeah.
different to me, Amala, and Sati, and it would probably spend that child would have most of their lives. People at some point in time would probably question who their parents were. And I wanted to take that away. I mean, people still might do it in the future, but they might do it a bit less if
Yeah.
we all look the same. And so that was my gut feel. My gut just said, look, it would be really nice if you could have a donor that looked a bit like you. And then the other thing that I realized very quickly was that, like, my relationship with my surrogate was incredibly and is incredibly important to me. Like,
Mm.
for the long term, these people are part of my life, like, forever. And I felt almost the same towards a donor. So in England, if you go through egg donation, you don't get much information about your donor other than eye color, hair color, skin tone, build.
Mm.
You don't get much more than that. You definitely won't know who it is who's donated that egg, and you won't ever meet the donor. And I almost really wanted to meet the donor, because in the same way that I love my surrogates for making a mum, I would love my donor for making me a mum. So I also had this view that I wanted to meet the person who would be my
Yeah.
donor. So there was two things that I looked for when it came to my egg donation journey, and that was, one, someone who had a similar skin
Yeah.
tone to me, and two, someone who I could potentially meet. So I wanted to do known egg donation. And then that meant that I had to go overseas, because I couldn't do that in England. I couldn't have a known egg donor in
Oh.
England from an agency or anything like that. I mean, I guess if I knew someone who was willing to donate an egg to me, then I could do it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it with a stranger, or go through an agency and get a known donor. So I had to go overseas for that. And I started looking into what our options were, and with the help of people, actually contacts that I had made through the surrogacy world, and people who were doing their own research for other reasons, found an agency and a clinic that were based in Cyprus, who had a
Oh.
lot of UK clients go over there because of either because of their success rates with IVF, or because of the donors they had on their books, or for whatever reason people travel overseas to make
Mm.
babies. And so I got in touch with this clinic, and I had a coordinator, and I was telling her what I wanted. And I said, look, I want a donor. I want to know who my donor is. And then I'll be having a surrogate carry this embryo once we've created it. So I'd be bringing her over. And these are
Yeah.
all the things I need to consider when we're talking about this journey. And she was like, okay, that's fine. We can help you. And she was amazing, like, in putting me at ease with the whole, like, overseas clinic thing, because I knew nothing about it before I started on this path. So she was just telling me about how the clinic works. I think because we'd been through a round of IVF and surrogacy transfers, I was more familiar with the process. So
Yeah.
when she was telling me, you'll come over at this many days before transfer, and this is
Mm.
what will happen, and these are the scans, you'll have to have some meds while you're in England, and we'll prescribe them, or blah, blah, blah. I was very familiar with
Yeah.
that. So that made me comfortable very quickly. And then we talked about donors, and she said she worked with an agency and she could get me some profiles of potential egg donors. And I said, look, my number one thing is I would really like a coloured person,
Mm.
a person of brown skin if possible. And she said, we do have some donors of colour. I'm going to have a look if there's, what the match is to you, and let me see what I can find. So she started sending me through some profiles. And the first few profiles, like, there was a mix, I should say at this point. There was a mix of people with white skin and brown skin. And I looked at all of them. I probably paid more attention to the people with brown skin, because that's kind of what I was angling for. And then I just read the profiles and saw if I felt any of these
Mm.
girls would be right, because I'm really a person who lives from my gut and my gut feel, and I just believe that what's right is right. And there were a couple of girls on there that I said, look, maybe this person, but I'm not so sure. And it just actually so happened that the two people that I had shortlisted, but with a little bit of I'm not sure sort of view, weren't available anyway. So that she was like, oh look, this person's just actually matched with someone else, so she's actually not available at the moment.
Mm.
And then this person's on a break at the moment, so that's not possible. And, like, I let it be, and I just said, let's just see what comes up over the next few months. I'm not in a mad rush for this. Like, I just need, I'd rather have the right donor before we rather than push her for anything. And then she randomly said to me, look, there's one other girl who is absolutely amazing, and I think I'm going to send you her profile, and let's just see if we can make it work. So she sent me her profile, and I looked at it, and visually I was like, yeah, that's she looks pretty much like me, actually. So I was like, that
Yeah.
works really well. But as I read her bio, um, within 2 minutes of reading it, I knew that she would be the woman that I would choose to get to use as my egg
Why is
donor,
that?
because the word it's well, so she described herself as she said something like, I I love being playful and having fun, and I realize like that's the importance in my life, but I also have a serious side to me. I'm driven, I'm blah blah blah.
Mm,
And she was very much like me. I'm really driven, but equally I love being crazy
mm,
and doing silly things with my friends, and I'm very light-hearted. So that was really resonant. But then what sealed the deal was that she used a line at the end of her bio, which is almost one that I live by, right? So one of my things is that if people don't laugh at your dreams aren't big enough.
mm.
And she had written that if you're not afraid of your dreams aren't big enough. And that was
Um,
on the last thing. And I was like, oh my God, like I have to get I have to at least see if she's available, because there's so much about her that I just love the vibe off, and like just really enjoyed reading her profile more than anyone I'd read before. So I went back to the lady and just said, look, is this donor available? And she came back and she goes, well, she's available right now. She's looking to take on a new job, and she might be moving in a couple of months. So if she does do a donation cycle, it kind of needs to be done within the next couple of months. And I was like, oh, I'm not actually like, I wasn't expecting for things to move so quickly. We were just sort of exploring at this point.
mm,
But it then became a thing of like, we were working to the donors' timeframes. And because of that, everything started moving really quickly, because we just knew that we wanted to use her. So pretty much within the next, I think it was within 6 to 8 weeks, we found
wow.
ourselves like, yeah, just we found ourselves getting payments sent over and getting her medication sorted and getting our flights sorted. And in the middle of, I think it was August, was it July or August of 2019, we wound up in Cyprus, me, Amala and
Oh.
Tati, ready to create embryos. And we'd only made contact with a clinic like 3 months before
Hmm.
to just start
Do
exploring.
these
But
clinics provide emotional support as well? Or do they
no.
offer, right? So it's just get the
No.
job done,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah,
much,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. There was,
how,
I mean, I don't know if they do. I never asked for it. They
yeah.
might do it, but
And
it's not something
Kreena,
I
you
need.
mentioned that at the beginning you were worried about how you were always thinking about the genetic makeup of the next child that you wanted to have. Did this feeling change throughout your experience going to Cyprus and speaking to these people, or does that still is there still like that cloud over your head?
No, it's not there at all.
Yeah.
It's like it's gone. I think it was probably it was, I don't know, it was there before we started our sibling journey, and it was always a question mark. But I think as soon as we found our donor, that question mark was gone.
Hmm.
And as soon as the embryos were created, that was it. They were mine. Like nothing was nothing. Even now, like I actually wouldn't think of them as someone else's biology. I just
Yeah.
think of them as my babies.
So now these
um
embryos have been implanted or transferred to Ina.
no, so then what
Oh,
happened?
okay. Wow. Okay.
No, so we were ready to, and we'd been speaking to Ina about the fact we'd made these embryos, and we'd been talking to Ina about transfer dates, and we'd said we would look to go in December or January. So December 2019 or January 2020 was our aim for transfer. And Ina was looking at her calendar for days off and stuff, and we were really on that path of Ina was going to carry this sibling. Then I went to Turkey on a retreat for a week and decided I just needed headspace and like counsel with my best friend, and
Hmm.
disconnected myself from the world. And the day I came back, well, the day I was leaving that retreat, after manifesting this family, like every day I would sit on a mountain, and all I would manifest was my family like coming to completion. And I turned my mobile phone on after 7 days just to get the flight details for my
Yeah.
journey home. And the first text I saw was from Ina, and she had sent me a really long message, and it basically just said that she had to unmatch with me for personal reasons, and that she wouldn't be able to carry our sibling for Amala. And um, it was another one of those cry my heart out moments.
Oh, Kreena, my
So
heart just sank when you said that because it's like every time you see that light at the end of the tunnel, something
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 happens,
something
right?
happens.
Something
Yeah,
does happen, and this is what happened. And I knew how long it had taken me to get to know Ina. I knew how
yeah.
hard it is to form a relationship with someone, and to even meet someone. It's not easy as intended parents to match with a surrogate. It takes a lot of time and effort, and you have to invest so much of yourself in it, and you have highs and you have lows. And I was just like, it all came crashing down because we just created these embryos so extraordinarily. Like,
Mm,
the donor was from South Africa. We traveled a woman from South Africa to Cyprus. We'd gone from England to Cyprus. We'd created these embryos, and we'd gone through this whole process, and then we now had no one to grow these embryos for us, and it was gutting, like absolutely
mm,
gutting. And we came back to England, and the worst thing I wasn't with my husband, so I couldn't even tell him, right? And I didn't want to tell him over the phone that this had happened, so I just held it until I got back to England. And then I came home and I said to him, "You're not going to believe what happened to me on the last day of the retreat. We got this message," and I read it to him, and he was so upset, um, because we'd sort of imagined ourselves as parents within the year, because we'd agreed that
yeah,
we would transfer in
yeah.
a few months, and we just didn't see anything really going wrong. And so we were both gutted, 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 and then picked ourselves up as we do and just figured out what are we going to do. And in that time, Ina had messaged a few more times, and she herself was really upset. So, and it's important to acknowledge that it's not her fault, and she didn't owe us a sibling journey. And if her circumstances change, that's absolutely
Do you know
okay.
exactly what had happened, or
She just had some. She just said she had some stuff going on in her personal life and with her own health, and she didn't want to risk being pregnant. And I've never really delved deeper than that, because I don't think that's my right. Really, I don't. It's not. It's
yeah?
not. She doesn't owe me, and she doesn't
Mm,
really owe me any more explanation than I will or I won't do it. And I think over the years I've learned that, and I've learned that I have to let go of control, and I have to just surrender and accept that this is just the way life is for us,
mm.
and there's no point in holding grudges. And she then came back to me going, "I hope you don't hate me." And I was like,
Oh,
"Dude, I can never hate you,
yeah.
because of you I'm a mom. Like, I will never
Well, she
hate you.
gave
I'll
you
always love
Amala,
you."
so
Exactly,
you can't forget
exactly.
that.
I'm never going to
Your
forget
frustration
that. And
was
I'm
probably based around the fact that you would have to go through another process rather
go through the
than
process
on
again. It was
her.
nothing
Yeah,
personal. And and I said to Sati, like, the most important thing right now, when we were in the midst of that, was making sure that Ina didn't feel like she'd let us down, and that we were going to pick ourselves up and keep going, because she didn't deserve to carry the burden of our sorrow,
yeah.
because it should never have sat with her anyway. So we got over it, and I chatted to Ina a fair bit, and I was like, "Look, don't worry about it. We're going to be fine, and I'll go
Mm.
back out there, and if a match is meant to be, it's meant to be, and whatever's meant to be is meant to be, and stuff." And so our relationship is still perfectly fine, and we still get on with each other just fine. But it was just, like, a frustration that we're back at square one when it comes to
Mm.
finding a surrogate again. So I went back out onto the forums in the autumn of last year, and just started socializing, and said to people that, I'm not matched anymore. I've got embryos ready in Cyprus.
Was it
I'm
quite
ready
an
to go.
urgent sort of thing? Like, did you have a time frame where you had to find a
No.
surrogate mother? No, it was okay, right? Because they were frozen.
No. Yeah, yeah, they were
Okay,
frozen,
fine.
so
But did you have
it
that,
didn't matter.
were you racing against time in your head because you didn't want Amala to grow too old, or like did you worry about age gap between the children?
Initially, I did, and that's why, we'd already set the dates. But I think once we knew I was back to looking for a surrogate, I just let it go, and I was
Mm,
like, "Look, it's fine." Like, because the embryos are frozen in time, it's not like I'm a woman who's losing her fertility the older I get. It's like, I've got these embryos, they're frozen in time. They're not going to degenerate. So it's just a case of us finding the right person to carry them. And I am like still an advocate of making sure you have a good relationship with your surrogate. I wouldn't rush into a match just because something went wrong. I'm not going to rush into it because I know the importance of a good relationship with your surrogate. And at the end of the day, I host a podcast about how you do surrogacy correctly, so
Yeah.
I would not be I'm not the sort of person who would advocate just finding someone for the sake of it. Like, that
Yeah.
wasn't going to happen. So I resigned myself, and Sati and I both acknowledged that it could take another year before we even matched with someone, and that means that when we thought parenthood was coming within 1 year, it might come in within 2 years. But we just had to accept it, and we'd gone through so much to get to the point of we knew we wanted to be parents, that another 12 months wasn't going to be a barrier to us. So I went back on the forums, I reintroduced myself, and I just said, look, circumstances have changed, and I'm now unmatched, and we have embryos ready, blah blah blah. We're looking to get chatting to people to see if we potentially meet another match and stuff. And I just went on through that process of being really active on social media, and making sure people knew about us, knew about our story, knew about me as a person. Because by this time, what I also learned was that I was really confident in myself and in me as an intended mother, because I had lots of friends who were surrogates, and they were like, Kreena, you're such a nice intended mother. Like, you treat your surrogate so well. And I knew we had treated Ina so well. Like, we weren't a couple who would let her go without anything. We always made sure we cared for her because she was doing such an amazing thing for us. So I went into this knowing that, I'm a member of this community. I've got friends in this community. I've had one journey behind me. I have this podcast that I've launched, and actually this community means a lot to me. So as much as I need someone to help me, I would be a really good IM for any surrogate to match with. And I had a level of confidence that I didn't have the first time around, because the first time around I was just nervous and thought I was competing with the whole world for someone to match with me, and it was a different mindset. So I went into it, and unbeknown to me, I think some of my friends who I have made in the surrogacy community were also sort of rallying around, trying to see if anyone was looking for a match, and line me up almost with people they knew. And then what happened was that I got talking to a girl who is a friend of a friend, and my friend who introduced her was one of my really good sort of go-tos on our first journey with Amala and Ina. And I used to always sort of just sound things off against her. If I was unsure, I would just be like, oh, how do you think about this? Or what should I be doing for Ina at this point? And we were really good friends. And then when it came to the second time round, she goes, I just want you to, I'm just going to introduce you to this girl. She's been a surrogate before. And I think you should just get chatting and see how you get on. And so we did that, and we started talking, and we got on really well. And we arranged to meet up sort of at the back end of 2019. And because we had a friend in common, it was very easy to trust and get to know each other, rather than sort of two strangers meeting, because we had that commonality of someone who we both trusted. We almost trusted each other a little bit more than we would have had we been total strangers. So we got on really well in the December. And then she said, look, I want to meet your husband and I want to meet Amala. Let's make that happen. So in the January, the three of us met. Me, Amala, and Sati met with her and her little boy. We got on, like, there was no real issues there. Her and I had been talking almost daily at this point, and we were like being very honest about everything that was about to happen, and honest about what we expected from a surrogacy journey. So the second time we met, we went through a surrogacy agreement just to check if we were on the same page. If we were to sort of take this to the next step and officially match with her. And the three of us sat down around the table and looked through the agreements, and again, we're very happy with everything in there. There were a couple of points that we had discussions about, and then came to a mutual agreement on what we wanted and what we felt would work for us as a team. And sort of really soon after that, we just officially matched with Laura. And so this has all happened like within 5 months of me unmatching with Ina, and it happened very quickly. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect it, but
It's probably
I feel very
your previous
comfortable.
experience that allowed you to probably work at a different pace.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you've probably removed all the anxiety. Once you remove all the anxiety and uncertainty, I think it was probably a lot easier to get through that. So
Yeah.
how many months pregnant is your new surrogate mother now?
So she's 5 and a bit months pregnant now.
Right.
So
And
we travelled out.
yeah, sorry, carry on, Kreena.
So we travelled out in February of this year to Cyprus, and
Just
that
before
was again.
lockdown.
Yeah, and that was mental because we were meant to go in March, April. That was what Sati and I had planned.
Oh my
And
God, I
then
just can't imagine another obstacle coming in there now.
no, I know. And it just like shows this was meant to be. So she basically said to me, Kreena, do you mind if we go a month early? Because it would be great if I wasn't really heavily pregnant at Christmas time. Like I
Yeah,
just would love to have had the babies by then so I
yeah.
can enjoy the Christmas with my own children. And I was like, look, I'm fine on timings. If we can get it to work, let's get it to work. So that's what she did. Like she knew her cycles really well, so she contacted the clinic herself and said, look, I would rather do this in February, so can, and given in mind this was now January, so she wanted to go the following month. She owned it, and she just said, Kreena, we're going to go in February. Like, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll book the flights, let's just go.
Yeah.
So we got on a plane in the middle of February, and we came back, and like, what was it? It was like we came back on the 15th or 16th of February, and then 10 days later found out that we were pregnant. So she'd come back and she'd done pregnancy tests, and they obviously showed positive. So yeah, that's what happened. And then literally a week or two after that, we were starting to the world was starting to lock down. And had we not traveled at that point in
Kreena, I can't
time,
imagine, like, just stop there, because if I just even imagine that scenario, I think I'd just break down into tears and just end this recording right now, because it's just
but yeah, no. So obviously,
but
the great thing that happened was that we were pregnant in February, and like, fortunately, whilst we've all been trapped at home, Laura's been baking babies.
baking the babies, yeah, the lasagna's in the
Babies,
oven.
yes,
That's
definitely.
so
And there is
where
more than one of them,
where
yeah.
is Laura based right now?
So she lives in Northampton.
Oh, Northampton. Okay, that's where I work.
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah. So now, just one quick question, because I understand that lockdown has affected not just pregnant women, not just new mothers, but also people like yourself, because you haven't
Yeah.
been able to go to scans or meet her or just see her bump grow. All of these
Yeah.
things must have been quite difficult for you, because I'm sure
Yeah.
from your from your angle, you'd want to be there to like nurture her and take care of her and
Of course.
hold her
Of
hand in the
course.
scans, and
Yeah.
you haven't been able to do that. And I mean, I went through the same thing as a mother, as a pregnant woman, that I didn't have my parents around. And it's only now that I have them here with the baby that I realize how much I actually needed them.
Yeah.
Because this is my first pregnancy, so for me this was new and to some extent normal
Yeah.
as well. I was like, I guess this is how it is. But it's only now that I've realized, and I don't know if it's my pregnancy hormones or postpartum hormones, but I've realized how important it is to have family members around and people who really care about you, especially at a time when things are quite sensitive. And I'm sure carrying twins is not easy. And I'm sure from your
Exactly.
end as well, you've been through a lot, so you will always
Yeah.
worry about something or another. So what was that experience like?
It's been hard, like, and especially because we've had one normal pregnancy with Amala and Ina in a normal world where we could be there and we could
Yeah,
share as much
yeah,
as we want, to then going to this point in time where, and I think the main problem was, um, because of my heart disease, I was shielding, so it
oh,
wasn't always the fault of the hospital that we couldn't get there. It was sometimes because of my own illnesses, I couldn't go
yeah.
to a scan. So actually, when we had the 12-week scan, yes, it was just Laura who was meant to go, but actually she spoke to the nurses and the team at the hospital and just said, I'm not the mum of these babies, and every other baby that comes into your ward to be scanned has their mother there by default, so it's
Oh,
not fair that the mother of this baby is not allowed to be in the room. So she actually really fought for it.
wow, she
And
sounds like a boss.
she is amazing.
Yeah,
She's absolutely amazing, and she has now negotiated that I'm allowed to go to scans. So I was there at 20-week scan. I wasn't there at 12-week scan because of my own health issues. But so we were there at 20-week scan. We've since had another private scan done, which is the one I was talking about to you
yeah,
about a moment ago. But what I guess the frustration is that people at the moment are having private scans so that mum and dad can be in the same room as baby, when they can't do it in a hospital setting. But we can't even get that in a private setting because it's always surrogate plus one.
Right. So
So we have a
why did you arrange a private scan?
so that Sati could see the babies because he hadn't seen them at all since six
Oh,
weeks. So that I'm allowed to go into the hospital environment, but he's not because obviously he's a dad and no dads are going into scans at the moment. So he hadn't seen the babies at all since we had been for a 6 week scan. Actually, it was probably a bit later than that, but a very early
yeah.
scan. He hadn't seen them at all. So we did the private scan so that he could go in and he could see the babies.
So that was a nice
And
part of your week.
yeah, that was a
Okay,
nice, that was a really
that
nice
was a
part.
nice
And
part, and then you had that
yeah,
bit of a scare
yeah,
with the lump on your breast.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
But we're all, we're
y-
still living in the joy of the nice part because that was wonderful,
that's
and Laura's
amazing,
doing an
and that's the thing,
amazing
Queen. I
job. And
realized that we spoke about resilience earlier, and we spoke about experiences, and I think, I mean, I might talk about this in a few episodes when I feel ready for it, but I'm still processing a lot of things like my own relationship with my own mother. There've been a lot of times where it's been quite traumatic for me and for her. We've had lots of
yeah,
ups and downs, and I think that's in the past, but now we're making such nice memories together. I think
mm,
that is sort of making less room for those times, because it has been tough between my mother and I, especially because we've been raised in very different generations. She
yeah,
was raised in India, I was raised here, so our thinking is quite different. But now we're on such a good level together, quite
yeah,
possibly because of the birth of her grandchild. And that's what I see
mm,
as the beauty of bringing this new life to this world, is that she doesn't know what she's
yeah. I think
done. She's created new bonds and new relationships between people that,
children are amazing at doing that. I mean,
yeah,
we had fractured relationships in our household before Amala was born, and all of them are healed because of her.
yeah,
Like,
it's
and
really
I think
amazing.
it is, and I think us as also as mums and people who raise children, we become less worried about ourselves and our own egos, and actually we just see the world for what it is, and we see these beautiful vulnerable little
Mm,
lives that come and bring joy with them, and you reassess what's important in your life, and
yeah,
you realize that actually it doesn't matter if you've annoyed me 10 years ago, because
mm,
that was 10 years ago. This is today, and
yeah,
today this life is here, and we should all be celebrating it. And it makes it so much easier just to let go. And once you start to let go of all that pain and that hurt and that you know negativity that's weighing us down, we become so free and happy, and we can just enjoy and cherish every
mm,
moment that we have with these babies who
yeah.
come into our lives. So,
But
you know, it,
what I was just getting at was that creating these nice memories with my mother now is making less room for the difficult times we've had together. And I'm sure it's the same with you now.
mm,
You know that you've been through a lot. And Karina, the reality is we will face difficulties in our life. I mean, it's
mm,
not like we would just get through life in a
yeah,
breeze. But I think the more time we spend making these really nice memories gives less space for the traumatic times we've had. And I think lockdown specifically hasn't allowed us to create these happy memories. So
mm,
we've been for like 4 or 5 months, depending on which part of the world you are, where we haven't had a chance to go out, meet people, and speak to different people, and create these happy memories. So we either dwell on what's happened, or we're
yeah,
just sort of fixed in this constant state of mind where we're just either depressed or jaded. So
yeah.
I can imagine what it was like. I can't imagine what it was like for you, because there's always so much to look forward to meet Laura, to meet the babies, to meet the bump, but that was taken away from you because of
Yeah,
lockdown.
and that's been the tough bit, because we like with Ina, we would meet periodically, and we would just have lunch or dinner or
Yeah,
something, and we would just see we'd have really long chats about how she is and how she's feeling, and then we would try and have time to see if we can feel the bump and feel any kicks
yeah,
and all of that, and watch the bump grow. But we've not had that. But and even when I did go to the scan with Laura, I was like, oh, I'm not meant to touch the bump, and she was like, oh, sod it, just touch the bump. Like, do you know what I mean? Just,
yeah,
it's fine. Like, and I was like, oh, that's not 2 meters, but it's fine.
yeah.
It's
Just
my
hold your
baby, I'm
breath.
gonna touch it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I took a face mask. I was like, I've got a mask on, it's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
um
No, that's
and then
lovely, Karina, and I really hope now things are just happy memories for you, and
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously still going to be issues. Like, there's still questions about the birth. Who gets to be in the birth? Because if it's only the person giving birth and their birth partner, it means that mum and dad aren't there. So me and Sati are at risk at the moment of not being at the birth, or only one of us being at the birth, or there's lots of stuff.
But
That
those
we
are those are things
probably,
that you can worry about later. Just
yeah,
enjoy now that you've managed to see the babies. You can see the bump now. You can meet Laura. The small things you'll figure it out as you go along, Kreena. I'm sure
I hope so. I mean,
you're
I'm
very
reckoning
capable
things
of
will open
doing
up
of
by then.
figuring things out. So I wish you all the best with everything, Kreena.
Thank
And
you so
thank you
much.
for joining me for part 2.
That's right.
And I
We'll do
feel
part 3 when they're here.
when they're here, yeah, we'll just keep going. And part 4 when I have my next child.
Exactly. Just keep chatting.
Yeah. No, it's nice to have an adult conversation because I've just been doing baby talk for the last week and I thought I was almost incapable of speaking to adults, but you've given me that
You've
confidence
done a
again
really
now.
good job, dude. Like,
Thank you, Kreena.
honestly, I can't believe you've had a baby 9 days ago and we've just
Yeah.
recorded another episode.
No, we need to keep going, Kreena. We need to keep these episodes going out. And you're doing a great job with your podcast as well and your
Oh,
advocacy
thank
for
you.
surrogacy and raising these conversations in our community especially. So if people want to contact you for any advice, how can they do that?
So the best place is to find me on my Instagram, which is just at Kreena Dhiman, so KREENADHIMAN.
Okay.
And then if you want to listen to anything surrogacy related on all of your normal podcast channels, so Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, you can find our podcast called The Intended Parent. So that's just The Intended Parent. And there's also an associated Instagram page of the same title. So you can find us on there as well.
Brilliant, Kreena. And thank you again. Hopefully we can actually physically meet at some point.
Yes.
With Amala and Radhika as well now. So
That'd be so nice.
thank you so much, Kreena, and take care and all the best with everything.
Thank you, and good luck
Okay.
with Radhika.
Thank you, Kreena.
See you later. Bye.
And thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Kreena. I could do a part 3, I think, with her. And hopefully, as she grows a family and she goes on with her journey, it'll be great to have her back on. I love catching up with guests, and I do that quite a lot, actually, just off the record sort of thing. I've been speaking to Raveen, Just Breathe, Isra, Reena, a lot of the guests who've come on the show before. I love staying in touch to see where they are in their journey, and hopefully we can try get everybody back again soon once I've settled down and once I get into routine and release weekly episodes as promised. So please do follow Kreena on her Instagram and show her all your love and support. She's an amazing, amazing woman, and you can follow her journey as well, and I'm sure it will inspire all of you people guys as well. That's my baby who's just started crying in the background, so I guess I need to end it right here. Stay tuned for more episodes, and please do follow me on Instagram as well at Meals World, and please tell all your family and friends to tune in as well. So hopefully I'll see you next week.